How much money do you actually need to prepare to buy a house in Victoria? Besides the down payment, what other costs should you consider in advance? Today, let's briefly go over these points to help everyone better understand and plan their home buying budget. First of all, there's the down payment. If we're buying a house with a bank loan, the most common loan-to-value ratio is 80% of the property's price. That means buyers usually need to prepare a down payment of 20% of the property's price. However, this 20% is not paid all at once. Usually you pay 10% of the property price as a deposit when signing the purchase contract, and the remaining 10% is paid at settlement. The second cost is stamp duty. In Victoria, you can calculate stamp duty using the calculator on the State Revenue Office website, or you can consult your conveyancer. If we're just doing a preliminary budget, you can temporarily estimate about 5.5% of the property price. However, different property prices, different purposes for buying, and the buyer's status will all affect the final amount. Stamp duty is usually paid at settlement. The third cost is the land registration fee, also known as the title registration fee. This fee is mainly for transferring the property title from the seller's name to the buyer's name. Currently, the maximum fee is about 3,614 Australian dollars. The actual amount needs to be calculated based on the property price and is also paid at settlement. The fourth item is the adjustment amount for municipal rates, sewage fees and other related charges. Municipal rates, sewage and water fees for the property are usually apportioned between the buyer and seller according to the settlement date. For example, if the seller has already paid the municipal rates in advance for a certain period, then at settlement the buyer needs to reimburse the seller for the portion that corresponds to their own period of ownership. This fee could be a few hundred Australian dollars or as much as several thousand depending on the settlement date and the amount the seller has prepaid. The fifth item is the conveyancing lawyer's service fee. During the home buying process, the conveyancer will help you review the purchase contract, conduct a title search, calculate settlement adjustments, and handle the final settlement procedures. Generally speaking, the service fee is about 1,000 to 2,000 Australian dollars. Conveyancers usually charge this fee at settlement, though some may require partial payment in advance. The sixth item is the professional inspection fees that may arise during the home buying process. Before deciding to purchase a property, we usually recommend arranging building and pest inspections, which typically cost between 500 and 1,000 Australian dollars. If you inspect multiple properties during the buying process, you should also increase your budget accordingly for this part of the cost. Finally, if you are an overseas buyer, you also need to consider additional costs. First is the FIRB, which is the Foreign Investment Review Board application fee. The fee varies depending on the price of the property you are purchasing, and you usually need to complete the application before buying the property. In addition, you generally need to pay an extra surcharge stamp duty for overseas buyers, which is currently usually 8% of the property price and is paid at settlement. So, to put it simply, when buying a property in Victoria, in addition to preparing a deposit of about 20%, you also need to set aside funds for stamp duty, title registration fees, settlement adjustments, building inspection fees, as well as conveyancing lawyer service fees and professional inspection fees. For ordinary local buyers, in order to avoid a cash crunch at settlement, it is advisable to set aside about 6% of the property price for purchasing costs in addition to the deposit. If you are an overseas buyer, you will also need to factor in the FIRB application fee and an additional 8% foreign buyer surcharge on top of these costs.